So thank you for this question. I think in this time, this is a very relevant and timely question. So before I answer the main sort of premise of this question, let me go back to the talk and just want to re-emphasize the point that we should not be thinking of robotics as something that is purely there for automation of jobs, but rather we should start thinking of robots as tools that are going to enable us to help us do things in a much more efficient, faster, and safe manner. And this is, I mean, it's very poignant right now because if you look at manufacturing, there has been lots of issues about having to stop lots of production lines due to social distancing needs. And robotics can play a big role there by allowing people to social distance and interact and work with robots and get the production back online. So these are very good examples of how robots add capabilities into things that we are unable to do. Similarly, there are other settings. So, for example, doing the dangerous jobs of inspection in places where humans don't want to go. So these are scenarios where robotics is now seen more as an added tool to improve your efficiency and make things more sustainable and economically viable. Now, going back to the main premise of the question, is that going to affect jobs and employment? It is definitely going to change the nature of the jobs of the future. So we need to start thinking about what are appropriate training measures to be rolled out for the next generation. But in my honest opinion, it's not that the jobs are going to go down. We will have newer kinds of jobs, but the training required for the next generation of jobs is going to have a significant shift from things that are just repetitive, pick and place, heavy manual labor to things that involve monitoring, sequencing, debugging of software systems, of robotic systems, and potentially a lot of jobs coming up in terms of management of robotic platforms, so multiple robots being managed by a small team or cluster of people. So the kinds of jobs are going to change, but I do not believe that the number of jobs are going to go down. Again, thank you very much for this question. As I've mentioned in my talk, the role of robotics in healthcare and medicine is gradually increasing. So we've seen systems that go from prototypes in labs to things that are now being deployed in hospitals, all the way from surgical interventions using the Da Vinci machine to things that involve smart glasses and goggles for overlaying CAD models for surgical help. So I see robotics in healthcare and surgical interventions more as some tool that will help us augment our capabilities rather than seeing anything that happens completely autonomously. So a very good example of that is using of robotic tools to reduce tremor in surgical interventions. So, for example, if you think of a world-class surgeon who is kind of advanced in his age and he has some sort of tremor in his hand, but yet the skill set is huge and the knowledge base that he has gained is huge. So we would like to extend his sort of capabilities in terms of actual surgical interventions using the help of robotics, because reducing tremor is something that robotics can solve, whereas cognitive contextual knowledge is something hard to acquire, which this surgeon already has. Another example is when you can overlay certain information through other modes of sensing, so things like MRI, X-rays, in real time over the surgical interventions. So it would make a lot more sense for robots to be in an assistive mode where you prevent the surgeon from making a mistake by overlaying information, by preventing the movement of certain tools to areas that are vital or critical. This can be examples where, critical surgery where the artery is critical, and you can prevent the surgical tool from creating a tear there. This is even more important in tumor removal and cancer treatment, especially in the brain, where the exact localization and matching of the image versus the actual real-time information during the surgical intervention has to be done in real time. So robotics can play a huge role in aiding and preventing mistakes in the surgical interventions. So this is a question that we as researchers grapple on a day-to-day basis. On the one hand, we are very keen on creating technologies, creating methods that are scalable and generalizable to domains that are out with what you train the particular system for. And this is the kind of holy grail of machine learning, being able to train on one set of data or one set of applications, and hoping that, well, I wouldn't say hoping, but actually designing a system that is actually scalable and applicable or transferable to a different domain. So there isn't a consensus in terms of what is the right thing to do. There is a short-term win in creating systems that are specialized and do things much more efficiently, safely, and reliably, even though the domain of application is quite limited for the task it's been trained. However, there's a lot of blue sky research that's going on in research labs, including the one in Edinburgh that I head, which the emphasis is on creating novel machine learning algorithms, representations that are scalable. So the hope is that by having this bigger vision, we can come across, or we can deliver some sort of groundbreaking, new, out-of-the-box ways of thinking about the problem. This could be either in terms of novel representations for algorithms, it could be in terms of novel embedded sensing, or it could be sort of miniaturized actuation systems that will enable us to think about a particular problem of, say, a pick and place or navigation in a completely different perspective. So I think there is, the short answer is that there is benefit in thinking both in a specialized way for immediate needs and solving the current challenges that we are facing, but there's also huge merit in thinking about problems that are scalable and generalizable in the long term. So this is another question that the research community grapples with on a day-to-day basis. So there's been a huge increase in methods that use data-driven ways of learning. And this is all the way from sort of deep reinforcement learning, so deep learning in general, but also systems that use purely data-driven techniques rather than sort of built-in models of physics, Newtonian dynamics, but learn concepts from data. That has been shown to be very successful in many applications, typically in computer vision, in pattern recognition, in speech and natural language. So I think there is no denying the fact that these methods have been revolutionary in some senses in trying to find patterns that is not visible to the human eye. And this can be deployed across domains, including things like diagnosis of patterns in a drug discovery setting, or looking at pathologies or say, disease transmission models that can be driven by data. So that's great. And I think there's a huge role for that kind of machine learning, data-driven techniques to play. Similarly, when we start deploying many such machine learning techniques in the real world, one of the things that we tend to lose is the explainability of such systems. So when something doesn't act as we expect it to after doing the training, then trying to explain what went wrong and why becomes harder in these kind of deep reinforcement learning, machine learning, and data-driven techniques. So there's now a new wave of research that has been focusing on exploiting the benefits of this powerful data-driven techniques, but at the same time building infrastructure within the algorithms that make it inherently easy to create structure in the learned outputs, which in turn can be used to explain failures or explain particular decisions when queried. So I think we are seeing the kind of marriage of the best of both worlds, where data-driven techniques are helping find patterns and create solutions that we would not have designed by hand ourselves. But at the same time, we are looking at techniques that, when deployed, can be queried for explaining its decisions and ensuring that privacy and bias in the solutions are minimized. Very interesting question, especially the beer part. So I think it's a fun thing to think about all the kinds of applications that technology opens up for us, not least delivering beverages. But I think there's a significant sort of more serious point to this question, and that is disruption. So traditionally, we think of supply chains and modes of selling goods through supermarkets and shops, and that we've already seen being disrupted in many ways through online shopping. And what this particular question refers to is the last mile delivery. In other words, instead of having somebody come in and knock on your door, sort of have a system which delivers goods directly to your sort of post box. So I think there is inherent advantage, both economic and scalability advantages of such solutions in a modern smart city. So if you look at new cities in all over the world, Singapore, China, Japan, some places in the US and UK, we are seeing cities being built from bottom up that incorporates such capabilities right from the beginning. So things like a hatch which opens up for your drone delivery, just like a postbox does. So there are particular advantages in scenarios like just now, where social distancing, etc., is crucial. It allows companies and businesses to continue to run even in a low-touch economy that we are facing right now. It also enables us to operate devices in a remote fashion. Think of avatar like scenarios where you're kind of running an operation from the comfort of your home while not physically being there. But I think the bigger point that this question brings about is, how can we scale services to areas that are either hard to access, sparsely populated, or is really kind of remote? And I think the point about drug delivery in these scenarios is a very important one. We have seen many scenarios, not just in the developed world, but in the developing world or in the underdeveloped world, where small interventions can make a huge difference in terms of lives, in terms of livelihood, and solutions that are economically viable. So we cannot have a multi-million-dollar drone deliver a half a pound worth of drug, because that doesn't scale economically. But there are solutions that people are checking out including things like fixed wing drones and sustainable delivery schemes that can bring benefits to a wider community. So I think this way of thinking about solutions, not just in the delivery market, but in everything from online sort of grocery farming to things like smart cities in terms of transporting people from point to point. So thinking about solutions that are not just cool, but are economically sustainable from an environmental perspective, is economically viable from from purely scalability perspective, but are also easily redeployable in scenarios like this, where we have seen an unprecedented change and we need huge efforts to bring us back economically. So this is where all of these efforts are going to come together. And I think robotics is going to play a big role in disrupting classical supply chains and thinking and delivering solutions that are completely outside the box.